Yo, what's up? It's your girl, Father Longlegs. You know me, Daddy T. This is You Can Tell Me Anything, the podcast where I have comedians confess something they want to get off their chest. And wow, very, very excited for my guest today. We're talking about like classic comedians, like this is a hero. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but you guys know him from Whose Line Is It? Anyways, he has a podcast called The Smartest Man in the World. I guess you should call it a Proopcast. And an album out, I think newly improvised album called In the City from San Francisco. So you can go buy that, stream that, give all the love to that. Please give it up for Greg Proops. What's up?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Teresa. How are you, darling?
I'm good. We got to know each other over the pandemic, which I thought was cool because I definitely feel like during the pandemic, it was so much like, oh, there's no more comedy. I'm sad. And then of course in all that, I'm sure you meeting me was not the same degree as exciting as me meeting you, but during the pandemic to be able to like get to know you and open for you was really cool. So thank you for bringing that light to my Zoom times.
No, it was exciting for me because one, we didn't meet in a club, which makes it so much better. Uh-huh. And two, we were doing those Zooms shows, which I think on the album I say was like performing in a booth in the 70s where they put quarters in. You're behind the thing and the audio goes crazy. But also it took me a good long time to beat it through their head at the club, the Nowhere Club, that I wanted women and not all white people, because I'm a white people. And white guys never somehow think that three white guys doesn't like turn everyone on that's a comedy fan. And so I'd say, like, could we not have three white guys? Because the first show we did, it was all white guys.
That's funny.
So then finally,
well, it used to just be that. So it'd be like a tall white guy and a short white guy. So that's diversity, like
right. A white guy with glasses and a fat white guy, and then you've covered the waterfront. That's humanity. Yeah, that's all of humanity. So no, it was really lovely meeting you, and of course finding out about your family and their history and everything was very exciting.
Yeah, I've just, I guess for the listeners, real quick, we don't have to get too into it, but yeah, we kind of connected on the fact that your father, right, and my great grandfather, or your grandfather,
my father.
Yeah,
I'm not old.
Not, or maybe I'm that young. It's all perspective. But yeah, they both fought in World War II. Obviously, I'm like, so I have to be like, also with the Allies, but in China. Remember when they were on that side? So that was really neat. And during that time, it was, a lot of me thinking about my family and roots. And I hadn't realized so much of my great grandfather's story till the last few years, because there's just so much entrenched in my parents moving and their parents moving that growing up, they didn't get to share that. So I thought it was cool to be able to share that.
Totally.
Yes.
No, it was nice because I feel one day we'll meet in person, and hopefully it'll be somewhere fun. And
with real I think audience.
Right. There's been so many relationships, I think, during the plague online and through social media, and that I think they're just how are they not as real as they were before? It's sort of the new real, I guess.
Yeah. So. I kind of found because you were like someone who regularly did these like shows, like productions, which is cool. Like it was, like you would get dressed in a suit and you had the regular audience. I forget there was a girl who would always draw and she was like a regular, right? I'm pretty sure.
Oh, right. One of Ben's friends was some artist and she'd sketch us during the show and whatever. But he seems to know everyone because he likes to schmooze, and I'm I sort of hibernate and boil in my own fuming hatred and bitterness.
Well, sometimes, because it's like, I love the connection too, but sometimes when you open it up, you can really get, I feel like you're probably thicker skinned than I am because you just know the ropes better. But I got like a comment the other day just from like an Instagram story, which is totally fine. I should be totally fine with strangers making comments. And it wasn't even that bad, but they're just like, oh, do you have a fake tan? And I have vitiligo. And I was like, oh, wow, you don't know that? But I'm like, how would you? Yeah. Because I'm just like, why would you say that to a stranger? But then I have to remember, I used to like get those teen magazines and like kiss Nick Carter's face. So it's we're not thinking of them as people. And I don't want to say that's fine, but it's normal. So
It is because when you're on social media or television or whatever, you're an abstraction.
Yeah.
You're an idea of who you are, and you can't expect people to have the same conditions for you. Even though I've been on TV and I'm often on TV, I'm Greg. I don't even have a character name. So people don't feel like there's any distance at all. So they feel real free to say things
Yeah.
like, "Boy, you've gained weight," or you
Jeez.
know, and you think,
Well, because you're in the business of being like accessible as a friend, like that's the persona you create,
Yeah.
which is, and you're good at it, so that's good. But then sometimes people forget that it's not like you guys have actually hung out and they can say that. And also, your friends shouldn't say that either. So
no, they shouldn't. I never say the two things I can't stand that people feel free to say in public are, "You look tired."
oh, I hate that.
I hate that one so much. And you've gained weight or whatever. I've never said you've gained weight to anybody, and I've never said you look tired to anyone, even if they look really tired and have gained weight. Why would you say it?
Yeah.
To me, it's like I always say to someone, "You look great."
That's a nice, yeah.
Or
You
I
can
like
always
your
be like, yeah.
hair.
There's no reason to put someone down, especially if they are clearly tired. It's like they are.
We're all tired, baby. But I've had lots of people go, "Oh man, you look tired." And it's like, I just finished doing a million things. What do you want from my life?
Oh man,
And
that's wild.
well, like I said, I always say it on I think I even say it on the album. There's comedy fans. Comedy is the only craft where people really feel fully qualified to critique you, even though they're not an expert. Being an audience member actually doesn't make you an expert on comedy. And they'll say things like, "That was pretty funny, man." The faint praise. "I saw your show and it's pretty funny." And you're like, "I want an unqualified rave. I want, you made the moon rise, you made the universe explode. I really don't need to hear you were pretty funny." Because I would never say to an audience member, "Yeah, you're a pretty good audience. You almost got all my jokes. You were kind of stupid, but
True.
So, but
yeah, there's also you're pretty funny for a girl, which
oh yeah, for a girl,
I get less
right?
of now because I think people are more aware. But that's just a wild one because you're like, now I'm curious what your barometer is.
Right, and the whole the idea that you could go to a comedy show and that audience members feel free to heckle you and say they don't like your act because of the content of it or because of you, whereas you'd never go to a music show and go, "Stop playing jazz, I like country." Like they don't understand that we're all kind of different. And it's comedy is one big Venn diagram, and it starts with Joe Rogan on one end and ends with Wanda Sykes. You know what I mean? Like somehow we're all encompassed in it, even though we're not. Like,
that's true. I was trying to explain that to my parents that we have genres in comedy, and it's very like when you say it, we all know it, but it's not like comedy on iTunes. It's just a genre, whereas like music, movies, at least even Shakespeare. There's only two, tragedy and comedy, but there you go. It's,
right on iTunes. Oh my goodness, there's country and there's ambient and there's dance and there's house and there's a new country and Americana and world and Brazilian and this, but comedy is one big fucking thing. I'm me and Bo Burnham and
Kate Berlant, all of
right, and some redneck piece of junk and some asshole are all the same. We're all working the same patch, and it's like, they don't divide us by audience, which is, they do by race, which I always find really insulting.
They do that, or by orientation, but depending on the time.
Yeah, right.
Right. Sometimes it'll be like
which way you face.
Show. But you can't have all bisexuals on a gay pride show. That's like not okay. And also like if I was booking, I kind of get why, because you want to encompass everyone, but it's just funny that you can have like a classic show and it's just all straight white guys, no qualifier, but a gay show, like, it has to have one of everything. And
right.
All bisexual, they're all comics, but they can't all be together.
Right. No, it's I've always found it hilarious. And the idea, like you say, of a gay show that can't all be straight or gay white guys or whatever. none of this ever occurred to any of the people that were booking comedy when I started. I assure you. I get slammed all the time for being too correct or whatever. And I, obviously I've said a lot of crap in my career that I wish I hadn't said, but
Like,
when
what
I
do you mean? Like,
started,
people think you're like performatively, or there people are mad
oh
that
yeah,
you're.
virtue signaling, because
Oh.
I'm not a sexist, racist asshole on stage. And so therefore I'm not really appealing to the real people who are straight white guys.
It's easier for them
Because
to get mad at you who they already like than it is to get mad at a racist person who won't listen to them.
that's correct. And so like, when I started in the early 80s, there was no thought whatsoever given to what the makeup of a show was. Like, they didn't have urban comedy night or Kung Pao comedy night, or the what are they
Oh, they
the
do like
show.
ladies' night or.
Right. And finally they started in the 80s doing women's comedy specials, and they would always call them like ladies of the night and stuff like that. Like, and it was always like, so wait a minute, women comics are prostitutes? You would never call like the men's comedy special the hung men of, Los Angeles or whatever.
I feel like
So
LA comics would love that though. No.
yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. I just feel like we're the last genre that is still fighting for our lives, as far as trying to. It's improved a million times since I started. Believe me, there's so many intelligent, informed, great people, and there's so much more room for trans people and people of every gender and persuasion and nationality. But having said that, comedy is still the most. It's like baseball. It's the baseball of fucking entertainment.
Yeah.
Because baseball, even though there's players from all over the world and stuff like that, all the owners are white. They struggle to get anyone to watch the game that's not white. They really do.
Although Asian people love baseball, but they watch
They
the
do.
international. Yeah, I didn't. Well, growing up, like when Taiwan won some championship, like everyone I knew was like into baseball.
Well, Taiwan, Korea, and Japan are the the stanchions of baseball. I mean, and then of course in Latin America, but like, to get a black person to watch baseball in the United States is a real struggle now, because why should they? It's a bunch of crackers spitting and a bunch of managers who, it's like, so I feel like we're like the last frontier. Like, we need to be the NBA or the WNBA of entertainment, and we're not yet.
But it's cool that you say that, because in some ways, like, I feel like everything. I don't know if it's like an algorithm. I think in like terms of like everything you do is compounding on the equation of your life, and obviously like you are aware that you are part of like the history of comedy, but also you saying that now and actively, trying to like meet new comedians and diverse and book your lineups diverse. You're actually adding to it while you're part of the history, and so it's like compounded the effect that it has, which is really cool. Like, I'm not trying to like blow smoke up your ass or whatever, but it is cool, because I think it's so many people I start with who are doing well but are still just a few, they're still babies in their career, like really struggle with that already, because there's a feeling of scarcity, like, oh, if I let someone shine, is that going to take away from me? But I think the reality is like, no, because like you said, it's a genre. There's always room for new musicians, for new movies. Why wouldn't there be new comedians?
I agree. I think that a lot of people, as one comedian friend put it to me, some people view the world in terms of, like you said, scarcity, that there's a finite amount of laughs, there's a finite amount of success, there's a finite amount of love, and that if you don't get yours, it's going to be taken away from you. When of course there isn't. There's an infinite amount of jokes. There's an infinite amount of points of view. When people say things like there's two sides to every story, it always makes me cry laughing, because there's a million sides to every story. If there was only two sides to every story, life would be so simple. And so, yeah, I don't talk about it a lot or take credit for it a lot, because I'm not that kind of person. But my wife's always saying you should sometimes, because you need to let people know. And so I appreciate you saying that, because I really do. There's a couple of other comics, Anthony Jeselnik, I think, and a few other straight white guys that made an effort the last few years to have women on their shows. So when I played in clubs, mind you, I haven't played in the clubs since before the plague.
It's okay. We're not gonna, check that. It's fine. No.
Right. But even
No, I
during
know,
the plague,
yeah.
because you did a bunch of shows with me during the plague.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have all male anymore. And I had to make that decision. And I had to tell my management, and then they had to tell the clubs, and clubs would still say to me, I swear to you, in big cities that shall remain nameless, San Francisco and Spokane, would say to me, we can't find a woman. So is it okay if we have one man? So there'd be one woman and another guy. And I'd be like, you can't find a woman comedian in this giant market, or you don't want to spend the money to bring one in from another market that's nearby. It's just
it's like that. They can't. It's wild because even from not from speaking on progress or representation, just from I feel like good producing comedy standpoint, it's good to have a lineup that has different points of views. Like it's even when I'm booking openers, unless I'm trying to really appeal to this is Asian night, which we have those. I want to have different voices represented. That doesn't mean I'm always it has to be a straight white guy to open for me. But to me, it's about the diversity of voices, and it's good for you if there's dates in the audience. Sometimes they're like, what's comedy? And then there's they get to hear a woman's perspective. Maybe now they're primed and they are obviously your comedy is funny, so you don't need. For you, it's not about finding the opener for your material, but having a wide experience. I don't know.
Yeah. And my friend Will Durst said to me years ago, he's a political comic, and I remember saying to him, I've got this political joke. Mind you, this was a long time ago, and it's the same topic as your political jokes. And he said, you're not burning the topic to the ground, you're opening the floor.
Oh.
Now the audience is thinking that way. And I thought that's a really generous way of looking at it. It's the way to look at it. You can't look at it the other way where because there are comics will say, don't do the barbecue bit because I have a barbecue bit, or whatever it is. And you're like, are you kidding me?
Hopefully
because comics will say to me,
original enough that you have different, it's like a conversation. You've got different jokes, similar topics. Yeah.
I have comics say to me, I have this bit that's similar to your bit. Do you not want me to do it? And I'll go, honey, do whatever you like. Because first of all, I'm reasonably confident that I'm going to be funny, but whether or not you burn my topic to the ground, but I just don't perceive it as finite at all.
I love the idea of opening the floor, because the first thing I thought was the floor for some people is the ceiling. So it's not just the idea that it's, you're kind of creating more space. And it's who doesn't love a basement party? Sometimes, you know what I mean? Sometimes I like a rooftop pool. Sometimes I like a basement rock band. So it's I want to go up and down. Okay, Greg, is there anything you would like to tell me?
All right, this is it, Teresa. I've been thinking about it since you approached me. And of course, there's a variety of things I could confess, some of which I probably will. But this one I thought was hilarious because it's so topical. I'm not Jewish. A lot of people think I'm Jewish. I certainly act Jewish and look Jewish. My name is Jewish. Proops is traditionally and historically a Jewish name.
Okay. I actually don't know if I know any other Proops.
No, there aren't any. If you know one, they're related to me. I swear to you. In the United States, they're my cousin. If you meet another Proops, they are related to me. That's how few there are. Oh. But it's from a family of names from Europe. Probst.
Oh, okay.
Propst. I'm not kidding. There's some horrible European names. Proobist and all that jazz. There's a famous Dutch, I can't remember what he was, like a lithographer or a printer named Jacob Proops. My grandfather on my father's side was Everett Proops, and my middle name's Everett. I'm named after my father and my grandfather.
I love that name.
Thank you. My dad's name was Stephen Gregory, and my grandfather's name was Everett, and my name is Gregory Everett. But his father, Everett's father, was Solomon Proops, And
Very like severe, not in a, it's just
yeah,
like gravitas. There's a lot of gravitas to these
right,
names.
like the Bibles.
Hmm.
And then my grandmother, Beatrice's, and by the way, if I was a girl, I was going to be Beatrice, which is hideous beyond measure.
My
Uh,
parents named me the boy name anyways in Chinese. And
Carrie.
well, I'm Teresa, but we were gonna be Tai and Zenny, my twin, and they thought one was a boy, one was a girl. And when I was born, they were like, let's give them English names, and they still kept Tai, which is like, I guess it's neutral, but they really were like, it's fine. I'm like, oh, this explains a lot. No,
So
not
you have
that
a
the
boy's
name
name,
changed. Yeah, I have a big boy's name, and I'm like, I guess I do have a lot of masculine energy, so.
right? Is that what makes you so curious? Um, yeah. And then my grandmother's father was Simon Adler. And so they're Jews and they're from, I think Germany, maybe Czech. I've never, you know what? The truth is I've never cared
Well, yeah,
enough to
because I
go,
want to back up to, okay, because it is a funny confession, but the context, like obviously, when you said like people think you are, so I'm a little curious to elaborate a bit more. Like, is this just like you've just been like, I'm not going to correct them, I'm going to go along with it, and now in the zeitgeist, like on Google, it's just like Jewish comedians, or
I don't want to
what?
destroy people's dreams. I know there's a lot of English comics who think I'm Jewish, and to them I am, and in essence I am. So I kind of, and it's not like cosplay. I'm not one of those. You know, you see white people like put on an Indian outfit or a Native American outfit, and go, "Hey, I'm Pocahontas." Um, my whole father's side is Jewish.
uh,
But in
but it
Jewish
didn't
religion,
like observant or whatever. Like it passes down through the mom, right?
yeah, it's a matriarchy. So it's supposed to be your mother. So, like for instance, I know a bunch of other uh, Jewish comics and people adjacent to comedy whose father is Jewish, but they aren't Jewish, and it happens. It doesn't mean, you know, like I say, it's an identity thing, and I'm happy if people think I am because I don't care, and I certainly make jokes about it on stage and include myself in it because I feel like part of it anyway. If your father's Jewish and your whole side of your family is Jewish, and believe me, if you met them,
But were you raised so culturally? Because I understand that
no,
a
my
big
mother's from
part of it is
Mississippi.
okay. Because
She's
a big part
straight
of it's
up
like culturally identifying, and then the religious part, right? But it's so mixed up now,
right.
especially if you're in big cities, that I understand just being like, oh well, it's easier to say I'm Jewish if all my friends or whatever. I mean, I can't say that, but I totally
Yeah.
understand. Um,
Well, like you say, it's a cultural. I identify with it because I identify with my father's sense of humor and that side of my family. And he was from Brooklyn, and he had a super caustic, Brooklyn sense of humor. And he spoke with a Brooklyn accent,
okay.
and he called people darling. And he was also fantastically fascist and a
Oh my
really
God.
awful person.
Okay.
Um, my father preceded the whole woke thing because he'd say to me when I was little, "Why is everyone so sensitive now?" When I was little, there was Polacks and on and on and on, and all these racial epithets. And they lived there, and we lived there, and no one cared. I'm like, Dad, they did care. You're just
They
a
just were
really
too scared to
belligerent,
tell you.
horrible. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, um, having said that, my mother's from Mississippi, so I'm straight up Southern on my mother's side, and they
Do you tell
literally
people
like,
your like I'm curious about because it's such an interesting like thing what identities we have so many but what we kind of hang on to as like the forward facing and it sounds like especially being in comedy I'm sure that you're aware of Jewish comedians does being Southern is that a thing you kind of but you know what I mean like are you like I think it took a while for me to actually be honest that people saw me as an Asian comedian because for
yeah,
so long I was like, well, I don't walk around being like, I'm Asian. But
yeah,
then, over time and over many auditions, it was very clear that like whether or not you see that, it's people are curious what you are. But it's
yeah, they
interesting because
are.
being from the South is its own identity. I feel like the culture in the South is like, Southern hospitality. There's a whole different vibe than the West Coast. Do you
Oh, very
feel
much
like you
so.
identify with Southerners a lot when you meet people from the South? You're like, oh, I grew up there too.
No, there totally is. And I'm such a West Coast person. I'm from the West Coast. I've almost always lived here. And but everyone always said to me in high school and everything, "Are you sure you're not from the East Coast?" Because I was a little more hyper and whatever. I guess the East Coast attributes that
A
people,
little smarter. No, I'm just
yeah, smarter, aggressive, willing to call people out. And because the West Coast is so not that. You never call anyone out for lying to you, because West Coast people will lie and go, "Yeah, I studied a lot of journalism or whatever." And you're like, "Really? Which journalists?" And they'll be like, "Well,
they're like,
the
oh, I'd
one,
love to get lunch.
yeah,
Yeah,
the ones,
I'm busy.
and you're
I'm
like,
busy.
yeah." And then when I go to the South, I relate to the Southern people because my family's Southern on one side, and plenty of white supremacists. Um,
Yeah, you
so
identify with that. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. The thing is, I hilariously don't identify with any of their politics at all. And but
Just their
I
fashion sense. Love the fashion. No, I'm just kidding.
me too,
No.
because the thing I love about the South is, and the thing I've always done is dress up. When you go out in the South, or it's a Sunday, for instance, uh, which is the Goyim Sabbath, the you'll see people in pink and chiffon and sky blue and canary and apricot, and
Yeah.
they wear colors in the South, and men and women, and the women really, and hats, and the whole enchilada. And it's okay to be polite in the South. You can be as racist as you like, and ignore the fact that slaves built the whole place, or the enslaved people that you dragged over built the goddamn place. We're never talking about that. On the other hand, they're going to go, "Hi, how are you today? Well, bless your heart. How are you? Can I help you?" And that part of the South I really appreciate, because the part of the West Coast that drives me mad is people walking into businesses and going, "Yeah, give me a latte." You know what I mean? That self-absorbed.
Yeah,
The
there's
world
all
revolves around.
hypocrisy, too, especially in the Bay. I grew up in the Bay, and it's very much it's like l- they're like liberal in politics, but it's like classist a bit, and so there's the element of like, oh, not in my backyard, but I'll donate
Yep.
money over there. And that's the vibe where, they're very quick to tell you something you shouldn't say, something, or how you should feel about your culture, but they're also like one-on-one, not polite. But then when it's like, oh, but I'm polite to gay people as a group,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
you.
Yeah. No, that's the part that drives me mad, And I always say, like, on stage, the South never lied to you. The South never went, "Hey, everybody's welcome, rainbow flags, let's do this." The South went, "Here's a statue of Robert E. Lee in the middle of our town. Get where we're coming from?" Like they didn't,
Yeah,
they
no,
weren't
they'll
trying to,
tell you. Yeah.
yeah, they weren't trying to bullshit you for 100 years. They let you know, this is where we go. At the core of us, this is what we believe is superior, and this is what we don't. On the other hand, we have awesome food, better food than the Midwest. I go to the Midwest all the time, and I go everywhere all the time.
Hmm.
And now I'm back on the road. I see more Confederate flags in the back roads of Ohio than I do in South Carolina.
Wow.
And
Yeah, and Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania. I drove through. We went to
rural
Gettysburg
Pennsylvania.
because I was
Yep.
like, I've never been. I didn't grow up on the East Coast. We never did the field trips, and we did one of those like guided tours with national. It was he was like an official
Yeah.
national park guide, and it was the day they were taking down the Robert E. Lee statue, I guess, and he was like he was like calling him Uncle Bob, and he was like, well, you know how I feel about that, and he kept saying like the North got lucky, and I was so
Oh,
surprised.
sure.
But
Lucky.
it was
Yeah.
so surprising to just hear this like national park ranger just saying like and also looking me and my boyfriend in the face, who neither of us are white, and we're
Yeah.
our parents are immigrants, but we didn't feel unsafe. And that's the weird thing, like kind of what you're saying, like there's an element of like, yeah, no, it's not great, we want progress, but in that moment they're kind of just like, well, you know how I feel anyways, how are you doing, you want a cookie,
Yeah.
it's like, I'm not going to do anything as long as you don't tell me I'm wrong. And it's strange.
They prize their racism like it's a pony they raised, like a prize 4-H pony. And at the same time, they're going to be nice and polite to you and shit. And yeah, like Uncle Bob, right? Like he was not only an owner of people, he was noted as a cruel owner of
Yeah.
people. And when the enslaved people that he owned dared to run away from him or challenged him, he had them flogged and tortured. And that's who we have to deal with, that reality. America's never ready. Like I said to Jennifer today, I'm afraid to even talk about that I'm not Jewish, because if there's one thing that really makes people angry, it's telling the truth. And so it would have been easier for me to just sort of glide.
Yeah, so how secret is this? Because
It's
I mean,
not,
obviously, it doesn't sound like something you've been hiding, but it's interesting enough where over time you're like, maybe I'll just mention it. So have people come up to you and like had whole stories about how you're their favorite Jewish
no, not at all,
comedian, or-
because people are super tender on the Jewish thing, except for that they're not afraid to be wildly anti-Semitic when they get a chance, just like every group. Like, for instance, people really, really will rank on Jews when they feel like the Palestinians, I'm just saying this for instance, are being unjustly dealt with, which of course they are. And they'll go, oh, the Jews do this. And you're like, wait a minute, that's real close to you people. And that, and all of a sudden, the jump from the Jews to the Chinese to the blacks to the Mexicans to the,
it's like othering, because most of the time when these wars happen, it's like, I mean, all the time, it's a few people in power and they're actually more of the same group, like all the fascists or whatever probably could form their own country. And most of the people just want to live and not be in danger.
Right. So like if I would say something like, I support the state of Israel because they're a democracy, and that all of the other countries that are surrounding them, the Middle Eastern countries, are kingdoms, emirates, sultanates, or religious, like in Saudi, Wahhabi religious combined with a kingdom, and they don't have civil rights and they don't have Jews in their parliament, whereas the Knesset actually has Muslims in it. Then you get in real trouble, because people start to go, well, the Jews did this and the Jews did that. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, man, but mind you, it's a complicated issue and I would never simplify it to any point. But I find, like, I lived in England for years. And when I lived there in the 90s, there was a woman who was a talk show host named Vanessa Feltz, and she was Jewish and she had a big nose and she was brassy, and English people don't tend to be brassy. They say, oh, thank you, Teresa. It's really lovely to be on your show. I understand that you're of Asian extraction. That must be very interesting for you. That kind of shit. So they would call her in the newspapers Jewish talk show host. Jewish talk show host, not just a woman, right? Like, how women are always women comics or women athletes, even though what? Women are more than men. So the norm, the centering seems off.
Yeah, well, they have to add it.
So the Jewish comics in England, of which there are many, were never the dominant comedy breed. Like in the United States, it's a given that if you're in show business or you're a comedian, there's a lot of Jews. I mean, that's just how it is. It was always that way. Jews started movies, Jews started vaudeville. Not that there weren't a million other people, there were, but let's be honest.
Wait, I have a real question, because just to clear it up, because I never use the term Jews. I say Jewish people, but I don't know. Is that something that, to me, if a Jewish person says that, it's different, but like, and obviously you saying it's different, but I'm curious, like, is that something, did I miss something, or does that make sense? No, I'm not saying, because I was like, I've never thought to ask, that's just something I assumed, but then I realized, like, yeah, is it offensive? It's one of those things, like, you can only say if you're Jewish or, you're in.
Right. Traditionally, in the old days, before we let people be openly about their sexuality or their gender, or and when, like in the 60s, for instance, you had Irish comics, Italian comics, Black comics, Jewish comics, and maybe your odd Polish, whatever, and then women
Uh-huh.
meaning there was Joan Rivers, Rusty Warren, Toady Fields, Moms Mabley, you know, like
Yeah, wow.
that. I'm talking about that got on TV.
Right.
That the public, obviously there was loads of comics playing all over the place that were, but I mean, like what in American show business, if I say schmooze to you, you know what I mean, right? Like everybody knows what schmoozing is. Everybody knows what a nosh is. Everybody knows what, you know, a macha or alta cock or whatever. Like there's a show business is Yiddish. People speak a little bit of Yiddish because that's just the lingua franca. And in England, it was never like that. When I would use Yiddish in London, people would be like, what are you saying? Like, for instance, the word mensch, a human being.
Yeah.
Everybody's familiar with it in show business. That guy's a mensch. That woman's a mensch, meaning they're a good person. They're a real human. In England, when you say someone's a mensch, there's a insane woman journalist named Louise Mensch, and they think you're talking about her. Like they literally don't know the Yiddish word mensch, which I find hilarious. So people would always call me and be like, what are you saying? Because they don't even say spritz or schwitz or schmooze or any of the common ones that everybody uses here. You hear rappers use Yiddish. I mean, you know, like it's just how everybody.
It's funny because I grew up in Palo Alto and I knew all those words. And I mean,
really, Palo Alto?
Yeah, and I'm familiar with.
I went to school in Palo Alto.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so wild. I went to Gunn High School. My parents met at Stanford, so.
Right, Gunn. My sister went to Terman, and I lived in Palo Alto for like a year when I was in second grade. I didn't go on. Sorry.
No,
I'm from
I
San
love
Carlos.
that.
I'm from San Carlos.
Oh, cool. So you understand, but you know Palo Alto it's the vibe of Palo Alto is like a university town, but also like it's kind of like what we were talking about, like the woke classist liberals.
Yeah.
But like they built a JCC. They were building a JCC while I was in high school, and then they did open it. And the ad they sent out was like an Asian woman doing yoga. So that's like Palo Alto, you know.
Right.
And yeah, so
get it. We honor your culture, and we love your food.
But that's the thing is like those words. I don't remember actually learning what mensch meant, but it just made sense, like in context. And I think being around like Palo Alto and then showbiz, like, and then moving to New York. You pick up on
New
those.
York. Well, but New York is so, New York is so Jewy and so Italian that you can't help but pick it all up when you're there. And Greek and Asian and Indian. And, you know, that's what makes New York so boss is like San Francisco, where I'm from. When I moved from San Carlos, moving from San Carlos, which was stultifyingly white, to San Francisco, where all of a sudden every single other block is another group. Then all of a sudden you learn to order a burrito and you learn to order Chinese food, and you learn the difference between this food and that, you know what I mean? Like you're forced to. But I think a lot of people come from places where they don't feel like they're forced to, or they don't want to be forced to. And that's where the anger and the resentment comes in. And then
how old were you when you moved to San Francisco? Because I wonder if it's a
teenager.
Okay, because I think it helps if you're like in that in your coming of age time, because I moved to New York and I already grew up in the Bay and I was, you know, liberal politics, but I was just espousing what was told to me. Like I would clearly just go down the list and be like, here's what I believe. And luckily I still believe it, but you know, like, you know, pro-choice and all that. But at the time I wasn't as aware of the actual argument. It was just very clear that I was a Democrat because everyone I know is.
Right. It's funny when you grow up in the Bay Area, you're poisoned. When I first started to meet people who were really conservative or actually were right-wing assholes, and they're like, wait a minute, no one I knew I don't get it. How does this happen? How can you feel that way? And then of course you realize there's a bunch of people and they're really powerful and they're running a bunch of stuff. And then because like, for instance, the Secretary of Energy is named Jennifer Granholm in Biden's cabinet. And I went to high school with her.
Oh, wow.
She was the queen of our junior prom. And I went to junior college with her at the College of San Mateo. And she used to have a TV show on what was Al Gore's network, Current or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And all the women who worked on her show were all girls, were all women from my high school. And I remember going back to Jennifer, my wife, and saying, isn't it funny that all the women who worked on their show are all from my high school, and that she was governor of Michigan and attorney general of Michigan. She's a really accomplished woman, a lifetime crusader for civil rights and from San Carlos. And my wife went, no, it's not unusual. You're all from the Bay Area. You're liberal. I was like, right. I forgot. It would have been unusual if we'd all been from Dothan, Alabama, or, Tallahassee, Florida. And then all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of liberals in a room together. But no, like you say, you grew up in Palo Alto. It's like, it's low key. There's a lot of, there's degrees of liberal. And then there's sort of the right, the 4 Republicans are over here. They live in Atherton or whatever.
Well, it's hard because there it's not, wealth is not equated to politics, because the wealthy in the Bay Area are mostly liberal, or at least, there's a lot of them. So it's not the feeling where in some more, I guess, spread out towns where the rich people are Republicans because they vote in their interest and they're sort of like them against the rest of the town. You don't get that as much in the Bay, but you do get that. I do think you get more of it with like race comes in more. And I think Asian people in the Bay are guilty of this, like fighting affirmative action, So you get into that realm where it's like a little dicey. It's like, you're really sounding like a conservative person.
And the Bay Area, like you say, there's that tacit liberalism, which always made me laugh. And that when I make fun of Bay Area people for being that kind of liberal, they get huffy. Like I was doing an album a couple of years ago, which I didn't put out, which I'm thinking of putting out, where I talked about my high school in San Carlos in the 70s. They brought in kids from East Palo Alto, right? And EPA is traditionally the black part of Palo Alto. Palo Alto is the white part of Palo Alto. And so EPA, they brought the kids in from EPA to San Carlos. So complete culture shock for everybody. This is the 70s. So all of a sudden, boom boxes and Afro forks and, a whole set of politics that wasn't extant in our town. 400 Black people put into a school of 1,200 people. Wow. Mind you, the Ravenswood was more Black and like that. But so at one point, there was a riot, basically, whatever you want to call it. There was a race riot, sort of, at our school. And the police were called and this and that. And I was telling an anecdote about it on when I was the Punchline in San Francisco. And I said, the thing I remember is cops everywhere at the school, which there never was police at our school. And because nothing ever happened. I mean, my school was just white, like the biggest thing that ever happened was someone smoked a cigarette behind the portable, like nothing happened. And all of a sudden there's people fighting over race.
Gun high school is, we used to have an area called the Path. I mean, in the 70s, that was like how it got its name, but people would just go and get high there. And then everyone knew about it and it was fine. And by the time I went there, it still existed. So
right behind the portables. So the joke was, or not the joke, I said the Nazis showed up at the school, and that's what I remember. I was going to school one morning and there was a bunch of Nazis out there, and they were handing out Nazi literature because they thought that we white people should really, get up on that part of our history and embrace it. And I said, the cops too, blah, blah, blah. I met a Black kid in the locker room, and I can say Black kid because we were kids. And we started chatting, and he said, you want to give me a ride to work or whatever? And I went, yeah. So I took him out to my car. And so it's me and this Black kid. And by the way, this is like the day after the riots began. There's a cop standing there, and he stopped me and he said, where are you going? And then he turned to the Black kid and was like, and where are you going? Right. And this might be my first experience with how that works.
Wow.
And so he said he's giving me a lift, and the cop let us go. We got in my car and we listened to Peter Frampton Comes Alive, and we smoked weed. And then fantastically, he said to me, let's make this the complete thing. And we took weed from each of our bags and put it in each other's. I swear to you, this is 1970s. Yeah, 1977. And because I thought, what the fuck? Like, there's Nazis at my school. And so I said it to the crowd, and the crowd went quiet. And at San Francisco, and I'm like, I want it noted, and I'm going to put this out on the album, that you went quiet when I said that cops were fucking white supremacists. I want you to know that you did this in the year of the reckoning, blah, 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 And
They do.
so
I mean, I love doing comedy in the Bay, but the audience does get tight on a
do
lot.
they just?
Well, it's funny too because they did it with you, but they'll definitely even like almost like if it's all white audience, they'll get even more sensitive if I start talking about identity, race, not even in a political way. Like they just want to make sure they don't laugh at the wrong time, you know, because they're not sure, and then they're not listening, and then all of a sudden I'm like, great, you're not supporting Asian representation because you're not laughing. No, but it is strange how they get quiet because they're just trying to process, like, am I allowed to laugh or not?
Well, also, you know, like making fun of Asians is still not off the menu for comedy. You know, it still happens. And to me, it's just like, I can't believe it. I see it happen. And to me, that's just like, as far as we come, there's always more evolution that can happen. But going back to the being Jewish thing, Lenny, supposedly, from everything I've read and listened to, Lenny Bruce, right, was raised by his mother, and he was nominally Jewish. I don't know that he was bar mitzvahed. And he started hanging out at a diner with other Jews, and particularly one guy whose name escapes me at the moment. And he picked up a lot of his Jewishness from that. So Lenny Bruce uses loads of Yiddish in the act, and he really does a lot of Jew jokes. Like, what's the one on Steve Allen? He comes out on Steve Allen's show and he goes, Steve Allen, Elizabeth Taylor married Mike Todd, one of her husbands, was Jewish. And his opening joke is, will Elizabeth Taylor be bar mitzvahed? And he goes, you know, like this, and does a big take. And in other words, I think he made himself more Jewish as a comedic device.
I see. To
make yourself a little bit the other. And then it gives you this vantage point, because at his best, Lenny Bruce is moral. You know, his morality is what we remember about him. Yeah, he was a drug addict and he was a snitch and all the other awful things. But his morality on stage, when he talks about the rich religious
what he believed in, he spoke
yeah. That there's an equality to what he did, the how to make your colored friends relax at parties routine. You know, where he's a white liberal trying to be with a black guy, and he always did it with a black guy, and they would do it, you know, I would let my sister, you know, date you, you know, and on like that. So I think what we remember him for is that, and I think he used his Jewishness as a device. Not that he wasn't entitled to, obviously he was entitled to, but different than, say, for instance, Jerry Seinfeld. Or Alan King or Joan Rivers or all the other comics that you can think of that are openly Jewish, that, or, as Don Lemon said, openly black. Remember that one? Because someone said, are you openly black? And so for years, Don Lemon was going, I'm openly black. Well, like, you know, like, or my friend Scott said, oh, your friend's black. And he said, yeah, I think he knows he is. You know, like, we know what we are.
Well, it's interesting that you say that like that, because I mean, in some ways I'm kind of, as much as we make fun of like comedy used to be all, you know, white guys, but it's like there really has always been like cliques and separation. And I know it's like, you know, it's gauche to be like, oh, it's harder to be a Jewish comedian in this time, but the reality is like people have always been exclusionary, and I think it's actually helpful to understand, even when it was all white guys, like how the politics worked out, because I think that's the easier way to connect to people who felt like an outsider, even though now, you know, people are like, oh, no white guys. But it's like, yeah, I think the idea is we want more inclusivity, but that's kind of wild, because I honestly, a lot of what you were saying, like, because I grew up in the Bay maybe, and then went to New York, as aware as I am of like, obviously the historical like persecution of Jews, like I haven't seen it as up close in those sense that you were talking about. And it definitely is like, okay, yeah, I do understand why people try to say like, hey, I've had a hard time, but then they get upset if they're like, oh, don't tell me I'm a straight white guy. Because there's room for all of our experiences and all of our traumas. But yeah, I think that's an unpopular opinion to talk about
It
race.
is. Well, listen, when 45 first got elected, I remember going on some Sirius FM show, and the dude was like an Australian dude, and he had a complete, like, Road Warrior Fury Road haircut, and he had a bunch of idiotic, like, skateboarder type dudes in the studio with him. And I was invited on. I was a guest. And I said that everyone who voted for 45 was racist. And this guy lost his shit on me, right? And he went, you can't, in his Australian accent, he said, I didn't vote, but if I had, I'd have voted for Trump. And you can't say that all Trump voters are racist. And I said, not only can I say it, I'm asserting it. And I'll state categorically that they are, and that that's what they voted for. They weren't voting because they were economically anxious or whatever the myriad reasons that were thrown out there by the press.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Because the press will literally do a backflip and turn itself into a pretzel to support white supremacy. There's just no, that's just a truth. But when you tell white guys they're racist, that's when they get mad at you. Not the fact that they are racist doesn't make them mad. But that they're being told they're racist, and that somehow and I was told that I'm not allowed to say that. And I'm a white guy, although, as you know, whiteness is bestowed on people. First, Italians weren't white, and Irish people weren't white, and Jews weren't white, and Polish people weren't white. And then as whiteness needed to expand to keep out Asian people, Black people, Latin people, they expanded whiteness.
Yeah, well, sometimes the people
to include other whites,
I was surprised that sometimes people, like, I mean, I've always been around Asian people, but people on like Reddit or whatever, like, there's arguments about Asian people being white. And I think depending on what kind of Asian people we grew up around, it's like, if you're in a town where it's like white people versus everyone else, and then if the Asian people are in the white, I see that, and white people like oftentimes, or Asian people will. There's a lot of survivalism, and obviously, what's her face, who's married to Mitch McConnell, or whatever.
Yeah, Elaine Chao.
Yeah, so there's that.
And then there's your Andrew Yang and his, hey, both sides are the same. Like, you're a rich guy.
Wild. Yeah, but it is wild growing up in Hollywood, watching movies where it was like black and white, and then eventually they're like, and Latina. But then I'm like, so what's Asian? And sometimes you have groups of Asian people who choose to align with like the culture of Black people, and then some people choose to align with the culture of white people just because they're like, I gotta pick because I want to be represented. And it is a bizarre thing to be like, I don't know, we're our own thing too. But
Michael Eric Dyson is a minister and a sociologist and a professor, and he's not on TV a lot because he's a little too honest, I think, for people. And he wrote a book called Tears We Cannot Stop. And he wrote a lot of books, but he wrote this one. And he calls people beloved, and he speaks in very highfalutin terms. I'm often accused of using too much vocabulary, but Michael Eric Dyson speaks in extraordinarily with erudition. And the vernacular that he chooses is very well chosen and specific. And in his book, Tears We Cannot Stop, it was right after 45 got elected. And he goes into a deep dive on whiteness, and he says whiteness was invented. It doesn't exist. It's a concept, and it's a concept invented to support a paradigm, blah blah blah, and it's killing us. It's the root of what's going on in the United States, because you read in the paper or you see on TV, the country's seriously divided. There's so many divisions, and it's like the country's not divided at all. We all know what's going on. There's white supremacy, and they're desperate to hold on to it. Yeah. And that's what is happening. They're either you're on the team that hates women, gays, children, medicine, science, and loves guns, Jesus. They've made it real clear. It's not that confusing. And that's whiteness. That's whiteness. And
it's
then
almost like an anti. It's not like not white people, but like what you're talking about, like this kind of uplifting of white supremacy. It's anti everything else. They think in order for us to exist, everything else has to go away. But there's no other group, like whether they're doing well or badly, that actually thinks that. I think it's like, I don't know, I think about the animal kingdom because it's like, yeah, obviously when you're being chased, you want to run, but most of the time you're not like, I must get rid of all my predators. Like you're just gonna live,
Right?
like you're just gonna live, and humans aren't even our own predators. So it's like the idea that for you to exist, everything else has to not exist is really detrimental because it's just an uphill battle. Like it's easier to just be like, hey, how about I try to thrive, and as I get more things, help others thrive, and then whoa, look at that, we're building.
Right. I agree. The zero sumness of it is what drives me mad. Like there's no answer to it because it doesn't make any sense at all. And it's an artificial thing that they've put together. And on top of all that, it's even more artificial in so much as most of them don't even believe it. The leaders of this whole thing, many of them went to Oxford and Harvard and are really, really, really educated. And so they know from the outset that what they're talking about is nonsense. So they're playing to this weird grandstand that we're supposed to believe exists and that is so powerful. They always called it, for the last 4 years when 45 was president, the base. They're playing to the base. But we've never been explained who this base is or why they're so powerful. And then we see them at the rallies with the hats on and everything, and you think those people aren't powerful. They're
hanging on to teddy bear, and you're like trying to take it.
Yeah. And they're all really aware that this is the last gasp of the brontosaurus. Like America really did get multicultural. We have a president and a vice president now who made a real point out of putting every single kind of person in the cabinet. There's Asian people, there's Black people, there's gay people, there's trans people, there's to show and symbolically, and a lot of people are, I don't like him, he is not doing enough. It's really, really, really important that he did that. And it's really, really important that they put a Black woman on the Supreme Court. It's unbelievably important.
Yes.
Because after a Black woman on the Supreme Court comes the Asian person, then the subcontinent person, then the gay person. And
there's
America
still room for white people. That's the thing. The goal was never to push out. I think people are afraid that like they'll get replaced, but it's like actually the idea is that there will be room for everyone. So actually, everyone should be fighting for that because then, there's going to be space for everyone.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we're in an awesome position in one way because we really do have a government right now that is for gay rights and openly says as much. And is not a prejudiced government. The last government was openly racist, openly, and homophobic and transphobic. What's his name was in Washington yesterday saying women shouldn't play in men's sports. Like that's some big issue that's really confronting all of us every day. Like I'd like to eat. I'd like to have healthcare like everyone else. Women playing in men's
sports are fun. Like you're gonna now call these fun? Like come on, we haven't even solved like hunger and poverty.
I mean, but they only have these weird like hot point button things that they always. And what else do you say? Oh, we need to leave the police alone and let them do because every time the police do something, they're afraid. I'm like, I don't think anyone sees it that way, really. I think we're all pretty much on the same page that the police are really powerful.
Yeah, like how they're
angry at us.
That video of when they went into that school and they all had guns. They were like, I don't know. You have all the guns and you're still afraid. You're afraid of yourself. I don't know. Like, what are you?
No, it's weird. Anyway,
that
was my confession, Teresa, is that
I love it.
As much as I wish I had gone to Hebrew school, I didn't. I was not bar mitzvahed. My father was. I don't think my uncle.
Did you go to? Well, that was going to be my. I mean, I have a quick game before we end, but I'm curious about did you ever feel like you felt left out because friends of yours were, having their bar mitzvah, which was my experience in middle school. Like, not understanding because at that age, it's just like, oh, you get to have a party or did you like understand like, okay, this is how this whole thing works or.
Well, there wasn't that many Jews where I grew up in St. Carlos. There was Greg Levin and Alan Levy in my grade school. And, but in show business, it's a real thing. And my joke is always, I'm half a Jew, which in Hollywood is no Jew at all. Because, so there's that.
I had someone ask me, actually, he's a good friend of mine, he's a comic, I won't say his name, but early on, like we had gone on a date or something, and he had said like, "Do you have a Jewish fetish?" Because he was Jewish, and I was so surprised by that question. Maybe because as someone who's Asian, I'm always aware of like, is this person like, are all their ex-girlfriends Asian? But I'd never been asked that, and it was like, I didn't even think that someone would think that, but I was like, what makes you ask that? And he said like, the last two people he dated who weren't Jewish, like specifically wanted to date a Jewish guy. But that was so funny that he asked me that. Like for a moment, I felt offended because the idea of fetishing anything feels really like dirty to me, only because I don't like it when people are like fetishizing Asian women. But
Right.
then it did make me laugh because I was like, oh, like he must really identify as like, this is what I'm putting out there. Because when I liked
Yeah.
him, he was like, oh, you like a Jewish guy, not
Right.
you. So I've always
Well,
done
there's that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there are those guys who only date Asian women, and there's
Yeah.
the Asian women that only go with Jewish guys, like it really happens.
That is
But like you
most of
say,
my friends' parents in Palo Alto, where it was that pretty much.
it's a fetishization, but it's also like an assimilation,
Yeah.
this in a gianter sense. Like my grandfather was like a slumlord in Brooklyn. And then he moved to the South. He moved to South Carolina, which is so not Jewish. And I swear to you, Teresa, his name, when I was growing up on his mailing labels, when he'd write me, Everett Culpepper Proops. He took the name Culpepper, which is so Southern, to call yourself Culpepper, to kind of erase the Jewishness.
Oh, wow.
So, like, yeah, it's assimilating takes so many forms.
Yeah.
Whether it's dating people out of your genre or whatever, or like people, if you're visibly not white, they'll go, can you speak Spanish? Do you speak Cantonese? You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden,
Because they can't ask you what you are, but they're like,
yeah.
I thought about changing. I almost changed my name when I was starting out, and this was like when I was like, I'm gonna do stand up, and I'd just been doing mics, but I was like, I should change my name because I never saw Teresa Lee sounded so like common, and I couldn't imagine it being like a name you would say. And so I tried a couple of times to like here and there, I'd be like, let me try it. Like it's almost embarrassing. I'll just say it. It's confession. I'd be like, what about Riley or like whatever, just like kind of whitewashing myself, and I didn't realize that. And then now I'm happy I didn't change my name, but that's a real thing because I'm like, when someone hears Teresa Lee, they're like, oh, well, that's probably not a comedian.
Right. No, it's true. Like I don't love having the name Proops, but as pointed out to me the other day, it's a comedy name. And as the Chronicle said years ago, he's blessed with a clown's name. So I'll take it. What's your game?
Okay, yeah. So let's end with this. So actually, it was sort of inspired by our connection on my great grandfather and your dad, but I wanted to write a game about the like grandfather clause, and then I realized you might already know this, but I didn't know this. So in case listeners don't know, it's problematic to use grandfather clause. I didn't know that the origin of that was from trying to suppress Black voters. So now you know, I guess. But anyway, so I've changed the name. It's called Lifetime Pass or Capitalist Ass, and basically, as we know, companies like to try to get cash quick by doing deals, and oftentimes they shoot themselves in the foot when people actually want to get what they were promised. So I'll just do, okay, so this is basically, I'm gonna name a couple of companies, and they all have done like lifetime pass / like really lucrative membership deals. And one of them doubled back in a very alpha way. So which shameless corporation needed cash, sold customers a lifetime pass just to take it back and make them look like an ass? It's basically the prompt / the name. I just wanted to call them capital ass. So we've got Disneyland, American Airlines, Olive Garden. Okay. Disneyland offered a lifetime pass to its first guest ever to the park. American Airlines sold unlimited first class pass way back in the day, and Olive Garden sold unlimited never ending prostable pass for $500. Which one took it back as a capitalist ass?
I'd say the American Airlines.
You are correct. It was in 1981, they sold an unlimited first class ticket for $250,000. A couple people bought it. I think Mark Cuban still has it, but he didn't exploit it. But this guy flew over 10,000 trips. He once flew to Ontario just for a sandwich, totally within his rights. It was in the contract, unlimited first class. He even like took strangers on flights. He would sometimes allegedly sell the ticket, which was also not against the contract. And then in 2007, American Airlines realized they were losing like $1 million a year. And so they just seized him at the airport, and now he can't even fly with the airline anymore. Because in order for them to justify it, they had to say like, you're a danger to the airline. And they seized his pass, and he tried to sue, and of course he lost. So that's a capital ass of the day.
Absolutely. Wow, that's so ratty.
It doesn't surprise me, but it's wild. Like it's like Coachella now is trying to sell lifetime passes as NFTs. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool for now. They want money. But imagine when they are doing Coachella in space. You think they're going to be doing that for free? No way.
And now we found out that yesterday it was revealed that a bunch of the people who put on Coachella give tons of money to anti-choice groups.
Oh.
So, right? So there's always the backstory of there's some.
Seems like where there's money, there's always some sort of.
Always.
And yet I still want it. Give me your money.
Of course.
If you don't want to be thought of as evil, you can unload it on me. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Greg. You have a podcast called Smartest Man in the World, Proopcast. Is there anything else you want to plug or promote, or
sure?
Coming out.
I got the new album out in the city. You can go to gregproops.com and get it. We've done pretty well with the downloads. There's no physical album of it. There's no CDs or vinyl yet, but we'll see. And then the film club, we're showing Raising Arizona Thursday. My wife, Jennifer, curates it. It's over at the Los Feliz 3. We probably won't do one in August, but we'll probably be back in September and October and November with we show movies every month.
Okay. This will come out late August, September, because but check out those movies.
Oh, okay. Well,
that'll have already happened, and it will have been very fun. But
yeah, and that's a podcast too, so you can listen to that. And then I'm back on the road with Who's Line in September. Speaking of late August, and we're called Who's Live Anyway, and we're back on the road, all over America, Northeast, Southeast, in New York City and Hawaii and stuff in the autumn. So
that's nice.
And then I'll be in London in December with Nightmare Before Christmas. We do it live with Danny Elfman. Yeah, and we did it last year at
in LA, that Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah, Bonk Park, whatever it's called, the football stadium downtown.
Oh, yes, by you. I have no idea.
California Bonk or whatever it's called. They spell it with a C.
Bonk of California.
Yeah, and Billie Eilish did it with us. She was Sally, which was really fun. Awesome. And then, that's what I've got going on. So if you go to gregproops.com, it's all there. Oh, we're doing a benefit for Arizona Democrats on August 7th. I'm trying to raise money for different states. We did Wisconsin, and we did Michigan, and this one's Arizona. And it's all the guys from Who's Line: Aisha Tyler, Ryan Stiles, Colin Mockery, Gary Anthony Williams, and Naima Funk.
Wow, what a great lineup.
That's awesome. Yeah, they're really nice kids. We're really nice middle-aged people that do Who's Line, and we're all pretty groovy. And so we're aware that democracy is on the line. And so we try to raise money for all these different states so that they can elect Democrats down ballot. And Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, is up for re-election. And he's the one who took over the seat from the Republican lady McSally that Ducey appointed. And so it would be nice to give two Democratic senators from Arizona again, which we do now. So anyway, we're doing that on August 7th, and that's on my website as well. So
that's awesome. So yeah, I feel like I don't need to listen to my morning BBC anymore. I'm just gonna listen to your plugs at end of every podcast, and I'll have all the current events covered. No, but I love it. You can laugh and do something good. So definitely go to those. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you for listening to You Can Tell Me Anything. You Can Tell Me Anything is a comedic podcast created and produced by Teresa Lee on the Hoo Ha Ha Podcast Network. The Hoo Ha Ha team is Ashley McAtee, Audrey Povar, Maggie Week Austin, Cardi Assad, and Stephanie Binot. The theme song for this podcast was created by Cody Johnston. The outro music was written by Shipwrecked Sailor. And the Hoo Ha Ha app can be found in the Apple Store to stream your favorite comedy series and laugh out loud podcasts by the funniest women in comedy. To contact this podcast specifically, you can email tellmeanythingpod@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram @tellmeanythingpod. Thank you.